A bit of a double feature here. We're actually taking what we talked about yesterday, order of operations, or in the last video I should say, not yesterday, and we're going to apply that to some code. And the code that we're doing is temperature converter. This integer math stuff we'll save for another video. So this starts with, what's the formula to convert from degrees Fahrenheit to degrees Celsius? I first invite you to maybe just recall what it is, and then the next thing I would ask you to do is to Google it, but it's right here. So in order to get our degrees Celsius, it's going to be 5/9 times the degrees Fahrenheit, right? This F is our variable, our temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, minus 32. Now notice this is in parentheses, so you should in theory do that first. And then we do, going left to right, we have our 5/9, so that would be evaluated first, and then we multiply. You feel me? We're going to code this, right? We're going to turn this expression into Java code and try to create some type of temperature converter. So I am in Discord, I am in IntelliJ. We're going to make a new project by going to File, New Project. My JDK is already selected, so I'll go next. I'll go next, and we need to name our project. Now you are likely already in the correct folder, the folder where you're trying to store all of your code, and so you could just simply call this one TempConverter. I, however, am in the wrong folder, so I'm going to navigate to a different one by hitting my ellipses and hopping over to my computer science principles folder. I want to make sure that my subfolder gets created. This is just good practice because later on we're going to have multiple files in the same folder, and the folder helps them stay together. So we're calling this project TempConverter, and I'm going to have a subfolder called TempConverter. I'll tell it to finish. It's going to tell me that that folder doesn't exist. Do I want to create it? Yeah, let's go. And we'll do so in this window. I'm going to expand my project folder, right-click on the SRC, and make a new Java class called TempConverter. Doesn't have to match my project name or my folder name, but it does. First thing we're going to do, we see we have our class header. We've got our body as indicated by the braces. We're going to plug in our main method. Okay, I invite you to pause and see if you can plug in the main method without having to look it up or go copy and paste for some other code. But I'm going to give it to you now. It's public, static, void, main. We got an open parenthesis, string with a capital S, open bracket. IntelliJ added the close bracket as well as my close parenthesis. Very nice of you, IntelliJ. And args. This is our main method header. Public static void main, parentheses, and inside those string with some brackets. Capitalization matters here, right? If I did a lowercase s, IntelliJ doesn't like that. Args. Sweet. Let's give this main method a body with some braces. So as we talked about in our previous video, the indentation here, which is optional, but it's for us, is to increase our readability. I'm tabbed over inside of the body of the class, and that's to clearly show that this main method is inside of this body. Inside of the main method, I'm tabbed over again. We're going to get started with our TempConverter program. So the first thing I want is to maybe include some variables, right? We're ultimately going to take a temperature in Fahrenheit and convert it into a temperature in Celsius. Okay, I want to make use of some variables. All right, so I'm going to create this integer, and we want an integer to store our temperature in Fahrenheit. Right, some recommendations here. Typing out Fahrenheit is not what I recommend, especially because I think I misspelled that. When my variables start getting a little bit long, I at least like to have about 3 characters in my variable name, right? Int fa, F-A-H kind of works. Capital F kind of works here. One of the things with your variables is you want to come up with variable names that makes sense, right? If I come in here and I want my variable that represents my temperature in Fahrenheit and I call it A, that ain't gonna work, right? If I call it temp, kinda, right? But you can imagine like having multiple temperatures or multiple variables that could, anyway, I'm going to create FAH, and that is my temperature in Fahrenheit. And let's go with something like, I don't know, one that we know, right? When we go to test our program, we're going to want like temperatures that we know. So let's roll with like 32. Okay, so I have declared a variable, an integer called FAH, and that is equal to 32. I'm not only declaring a variable, I'm assigning it, I'm initializing it, I'm giving it a value using our assignment operator. Sweet. So I have this variable, and now I want to basically develop this formula. I'm actually going to we'll just keep coming back to that slide. Okay, so I'm going to create an integer to store the result in, and we can just plug in this formula here, right? 5 divided by 9 times f minus 32, but that's in parentheses. So here would be a good spot to kind of pause, see if you can translate this formula into Java code. But we're going to do that now, right? I'm going to take 5 divided by 9. The spacing here is up to you, as we kind of learned with our indentation thing. I could just do 5 divided by 9. Doesn't matter. Times, right, in parentheses, f minus 32. Set f there. What is this in our program? It's actually this variable, fa. Right, in order to get my temperature in Celsius, I'm going to take my Fahrenheit temperature, subtract 32, that's in parentheses because it's the first thing we're going to do, and we're going to multiply that by 5/9. Let's try this out, right? This is actually an algebraic expression, arithmetic expression. This formula will get a value from this, right? This is going to produce a number, which we're then saving into cell. I want to print off cell to see what it is. So I'm going to use a system.out.println, printing cell. Okay, let's try this out. I'm going to execute my program. I'm going to right click in free space because this is the first time I'm running it, and I will tell it to run. Ooh, 0, right? That makes sense. 32 degrees in Fahrenheit is equal to 0 degrees in Celsius. So that looks pretty good. Something of note, I'm just dumping a number to my console. That's typically not a good practice, right? Especially as we add more and more stuff. You saw in like simple math, for instance, there was just a bunch of random numbers getting dumped to the console, and you like don't quite know what those numbers correspond with. So I highly recommend taking this number and annotating it. What do I mean? Let's add some strings, some text, so that it explains what this number is. And I got a big brain one for you here. We would do maybe something like fa. That's our original temperature, right? So I want to display that. I want to say 32 Fahrenheit is equal to blah, blah, blah Celsius, right? So 32, right? Keep in mind that whenever I talk about this variable, it's going to give me that value, right? So 32 Fahrenheit is equivalent to then my Celsius conversion temperature, and I'm going to label that as well. You with me? What I'm trying to do is say something like 32 Fahrenheit is equivalent to 0 Celsius. That's what we're trying to do here. Oh, and actually I need to do a plus sign here. So we're alternating between variable and text in order to create this annotation that I'm looking for. Let's run it. All right, 32, right? Because here I'm asking for this value at that moment. Whenever I go to print it, it's 32. Fahrenheit is equivalent to, then we see our variable, right? This was the result of this calculation, 0 C, Celsius. Sweet. Okay. Let's try a different number. Right? Again, I recommend testing with things that you know. What's a good number to test with? And I hope your answer is 212. Why 212? Well, that's the boiling point of water. And in Fahrenheit, that number should translate to 100 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to run my program, and I get 0 degrees. That's not right. This is why we test. I'm going to reveal the reason that we're getting 0 degrees Celsius in our next video.